warm greetings from DELNET Developing Library Network, New Delhi, India, a major resource sharing library network in India, which connects more than 9,700 institutions across India and many other countries. Esteemed and most distinguished speaker, Professor G. Sayeed Choudhury, Shri K. Jayakumar, President DELNET, Dr. S.S. Murthy, Vice President, Dr. P.R. Goswami, Treasurer, the eminent librarians, library and information science professionals, heads of various departments of library and information science, technology experts, faculty members, researchers and scholars, my DELNET colleagues here at its head office at New Delhi and also its coordination units in Bangalore, Pune and Vadodara, ladies and gentlemen. I, Dr. Sangeeta Kaul, Director DELNET, on behalf of DELNET Developing Library Network, New Delhi, India, extends a very warm, hearty welcome to all of you for joining us today online from different parts of India and many other countries, including Bhutan, Canada, Kuwait, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, USA, and Zambia at the 27th DELNET Annual Lecture, which will shortly be delivered by our distinguished speaker, Professor G. Sayeed Choudhury, Associate Dean for Digital Infrastructure, Director of Open Source Program Office, Carnegie Mellon Libraries, Carnegie Mellon University, Pittsburgh, USA, and Executive Director of Open Forum for AI. We are much grateful to each one of you for your overwhelming response, as more than 1,500 participants from across the globe have registered for today's DELNET Annual Lecture. At the very outset, we would like to express a very warm, sincere, and immense gratitude and profound thanks to Professor G. Sayeed Choudhury for acceding to our request and for delivering the most prestigious DELNET Annual Lecture 2025 on the topic Openness as a Design Principle for AI as Infrastructure. We remain ever grateful to you, Professor Choudhury, for your very incredible support, and making it possible for us to have you on this occasion. We remain truly, truly grateful for your very warm support. Thank you so very much indeed from the organizer DELNET and also each one of us who are being here on this platform today. We extend a very warm welcome to our very distinguished speaker who is there with us today from US. Thank you so very much indeed. I would like to apprise you all that DELNET has been organizing the annual lectures since 1998. These lectures have been delivered in the past by eminent experts, including Dr. V.S. Arunachalam, Distinguished Service Professor, Carnegie Mellon University, Dr. N. Sheshagiri, Founder Director Journal NIC, Professor V.S. Prasad, Director NAC, Mr. Stephen Abraham, President SLA USA, Mr. Brent May, President SLA, Dr. Gulshan Rai, Director Journal ICERT, Mr. Brian Gambles, Executive Director, Library of Birmingham, UK, Dr. Heather Brown, Assistant Director, RSLAP Australia, Mrs. Anjana Bhatt, University Librarian, Florida Gulf Coast University, Florida, Dr. Camilla Elire, former President, American Library Association, Professor Boyan Kim, CTO and Associate Professor, University of Rhode Island Libraries, USA, Mrs. Trish Hamford, Director of Policy and Education, Australian Library and Information Association, Dr. Esther Amela Claperis, Head of Editorial Planning and Quality Library Services at Barcelona, Spain, and Professor Emila Drabinsky, immediate past President, American Library Association, and also the Associate Professor at Queens College Graduate School of Library and Information Studies at New York, USA. We have a profound honor and pleasure in having with us today Professor G. Sayeed Choudhury, who is known globally for his remarkable, outstanding contributions to the world of libraries and emerging digital technologies. I take immense pleasure in introducing our distinguished speaker. Professor G. Sayeed Choudhury is the Associate Dean for Digital Infrastructure and Director of the Open Source Programs at Carnegie Mellon Libraries and an affiliated faculty member of the Block Center for Technology and Society and Scott Institute for Energy Innovation, as well as Executive Director of the Open Forum for AI. Professor Choudhury is a director of an Alfred P. Sloan Foundation grant for the coordination of universities' OSPOs and a co-investigator for the Beyond Data Project. Professor Choudhury is a member of the Open Source Initiative Board and Human AI Collective Advisory Board of BGV and EAIGG. He is a software area expert and a member of the steering committee for the Research Data Alliance of US. Professor Choudhury was a President Obama's Appointed to the National Museum and Library Services Board, he was also the member of the National Academics Committee on Forecasting Costs for Preserving, Archiving, and Promoting Access to Biomedical Data, and a member of the National Academy's Board on Research Data and Information. Professor Choudhury was also a member of the Blue Ribbon Task Force on Sustainable Digital Preservation and Access. He has testified for Research Subcommittee of the Congressional Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. I'm also very pleased to inform you all that Professor Choudhury was a member of the board of the National Information Standards Organization, OpenAI 2020, Duraspace, the ICP-SR Council, Digital Library Federation Advisory Committee, Library of Congress National Digital Stewardship Alliance Coordinating Committee, Federation of Earth Scientists Information Partnership, and also the Project Muse Advisory Board. Professor Choudhury was a member of the ECAR Data Curation Working Group. He has been a senior presidential fellow with the Council on Library and Information Resources, a lecturer in the Department of Computer Science at Johns Hopkins, and a research fellow at the Graduate School of Library and Information Sciences at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He is also the recipient of 2012 OCLC Lita Kilgore Award. Professor Choudhury has served as a principal investigator for projects funded through the National Science Foundation, Institute for Museum and Library Services, Library of Congress, NDIIPP, Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, Open Society Foundation, Microsoft Research, and Maryland-based Venture Capital Group. Professor Choudhury has published articles in journals and also in International Journal of Digital Curation, DLIT, the Journal of Digital Information, First Monday, and the Library Trends, and presented at various open source events hosted by United Nations, Open Forum Europe, Open Ireland Network, and the Linux Foundation. Professor Choudhury previously was the Associate Dean for Digital Infrastructure Applications and Services and Hodgson Director of the Digital Research and Curation Center at the Sheridan Libraries of Johns Hopkins University, where he led the JHU library team that supported the COVID-19 dashboard and launched the JHU's Open Source Programs Office, the first of its kind within a US university. It's a profound honor and pleasure now in requesting our esteemed speaker, Professor G. Sayeed Choudhury, to kindly deliver the 27th DELNET Annual Lecture. May I have the pleasure of requesting you, Professor Choudhury, to kindly start the deliberations. Over to you.
So thank you so much for that very, very kind introduction. Really, it is quite a pleasure and an honor for me to have this opportunity. So thank you, Dr. Sangeeta Kaul and other members of DELNET for this opportunity. And I especially appreciate that it is late in India right now. It is the evening. So for accommodating my time zone, I'm very grateful for that as well. So I will be speaking about openness as a design principle for AI as infrastructure. And this very much relates to my research area, which is thinking about openness in the design of digital infrastructure, in particular the internet and the web, and what are some of the lessons from those infrastructure development efforts that could be relevant and important as we think about the trajectory of AI. If there are two main points that I would like to leave you with over the course of this presentation, they are the following. The first is that the trajectory of AI is yet to be determined. You know, we sometimes hear of a somewhat inevitable set of progress and pathways and trajectories, and I would submit that that is not the case, that there are still fundamental questions in terms of how AI evolves and how we move forward with it, and that we are still in the early stages of this journey. And the second is, do we wish to interact with AI, particularly when it is thought of as infrastructure, as a service that you simply consume, or as a download, or as a set of components that we can work with and build infrastructure? And I'll revisit these points over the course of my talk. So I'll begin with this picture that I saw recently. A colleague of mine at Carnegie Mellon shared this with me. And you can see in the top right, it says the most popular AI chatbots in 2025. And you'll probably notice immediately the very large number that ChatGPT has in an absolute sense, but certainly in a relative sense compared to the other types of models. And this is, I think, somewhat at the heart of this premise of US AI dominance. But a couple of points that I would raise about this chart. Number one, DeepSeek has now risen to number 2 on this list. It's still quite far behind in terms of a chatbot from OpenAI, but I think that's a notable point and one I will come back to in the rest of this talk. And the second is that this is really talking about chatbots. So interacting with ChatGPT or any of the other systems here, you ask a question, it feels like you're getting a very substantive and real answer, but fundamentally any of the responses you get are guesses. Some of those guesses are better than others. Some of the guesses, when they're not very well done, are what we call hallucinations. But there are, of course, many other types of AI, according to content or format. So there's image-based AI. You may have seen the next version of Sora that came out from OpenAI recently. There's video-based chatbots. And there's also an increasing use of AI to accomplish tasks. And this is very much at the heart of agentic AI, which is a theme that I think is important for all of us to think about. So we're shifting in many ways from this interaction of I ask a question, I get a guess or an answer, to I use AI to actually accomplish tasks. I use AI to orchestrate workflows. And in that context, I think it'll be interesting to think about this diagram. And I'll talk a little bit about that over the course of these next slides. We keep mentioning AI as infrastructure, and I think even as early as a few months ago, when I would talk about this, I would say this is basically just an observation or assertion on my part, given what I've seen of other kinds of infrastructure, digital infrastructure development. It felt like these foundational or frontier LLMs, as they're called, were becoming infrastructure. But it's important to now note that the OpenAI Chief Global Affairs Officer, Chris Lehane, actually has said as much. The quote is that AI is core infrastructure for nation building, akin to electricity. So in that spirit, it's really important to ask the question of how we want our infrastructure to be developed and how we want it to be managed. I'm a firm believer in public infrastructure, and that's not to say that you can't have private innovation, you can't have profit, you can't have private sector activity. If you look at the internet, if you look at the web, there's been a tremendous amount of private sector activity, profit and revenue and so on. So they're not at odds with each other, but I do believe that infrastructure needs to be public and transparent and participatory, and that we need to be able to inspect it. We need to see how open fosters that kind of engagement, and then you can build an entire ecosystem of open and maybe not even open applications and services on top of that infrastructure. Another really important point is this idea of the role of academia, and I would also argue nonprofit and civil society organizations. So I attended the AI for Good Summit earlier this year in Geneva this past June. There were many sessions that talked about this theme, but one in particular, as you can see, in essence said, we need to have academia address this kind of open development effort and a gap that seems to be developing when it comes to unequal access to compute, data, and expertise. And they see this as a really important part of democratizing or broadening access to AI. And again, I'll come back to the point of not only broadening it so that I can use an open model to work with AI, but I can use open components and open models to build AI, just for my own uses or at my university, or even as large as something in terms of a national strategy. To that effect, I do lead something called the Open Forum for AI, or OFAI, and this is an academic and nonprofit-led partnership that is aiming to bend the arc toward more human-centered, responsible, transparent, and ethical AI. And by that we mean that the people who use these AI systems and use AI generally should have some impact and influence in the development of AI, so that I don't simply wait for a release from a company and take it as it is, but I have the ability to say, this is what I need, this is what I want, and that the companies and others account for that, and that we move further upstream in the development process, so that we don't wait until something is released to then comment on it, but rather comment in an iterative and a continuous fashion, and then in essence have that incorporated into actually the design of the systems all the way through the deployment and then evaluation of those systems. And another key element of OFAI is this balance between academia, government, and industry. I think this was a key type of balance between the three sectors for the development of the internet and for the development of the web. And I would submit that that has gotten somewhat out of balance right now, and that has some profound impact and implications for how AI develops. So let me shift a little bit to some conversations around openness as a design principle for the internet and the web. My understanding is this is one of the first diagrams for the TCP/IP protocol that underlies the internet. And you can see that there are some universities listed here. You can see that there's some other government organizations here, and so on. And that there were, of course, private companies that were involved in the development of this as well. But again, I would submit that there was a balance between the three, and that it was done as a partnership, and that this open protocol has had profound benefits in terms of the development of the internet. And the second protocol is for the web, or HTTP. This is the Wikipedia page on HTTP as a protocol. Same thing, it is an open protocol. It was largely developed out of academia or the research sector in CERN in this case, and then rolled out eventually to the point where governments and industry engaged, and we have this World Wide Web. And that's a really important term, right? The World Wide Web. So imagine if we had multiple internets, or if we had multiple webs. It would have been a very different set of experiences. It would have been a very different set of outcomes. And I fear that that is one of the potential consequences of what we're facing today, is we may have multiple AI infrastructures. And I think that the issues for that range all the way from just being inconvenient, that I'd have to keep switching between different AI kind of platforms or infrastructure, to it just makes it really hard to do things at global scale. Let me shift a little bit before I come back to protocols to the idea of open source. So some of you may know that there is actually a definition that exists for open source software. As you heard in the introduction, I'm a board member of the Open Source Initiative, which is the organization that actually is the steward for this definition. And that there are a set of canonical licenses that exist around this definition. There are the so-called freedoms associated with open source software, but there are four main ones that we often talk about, and those are the ability to use, study, share, and modify the software without restrictions. And there have been tremendous benefits from having this definition, from having these licenses, and having this openness associated with software. There's a Harvard Business School study that has shown the value generated by open source software over time has been almost $9 trillion, and I said trillion with a T, and that it's reduced production costs of software by a factor of 3.5. So I'd made that point earlier that open does not in any way inhibit sort of private sector, public sector, government sector, university sector development. And I think that open source software has shown us in very clear terms that that in fact is the case. So more recently, the Open Source Initiative led a community-based process to come up with version 1.0 of a definition for open source AI. It probably doesn't surprise you that it affirms these four freedoms of using, studying, modifying, and sharing. So those are the principles that very much guided the development of this definition. This was done through a global community process. OSI worked with over 150 individuals throughout the globe from various sectors with various sets of expertise. And we realized that OSI's sort of typical community engagement happens with software developers and IT people working on software, and then the legal experts around open source software. So I would submit that there's a couple of important things to keep in mind about this definition, is that AI is fundamentally more complex than software. So there are engineering aspects of open source AI that need to be accounted for in subsequent versions of this definition, and that it was a community process. And I think that's really important. And I think that's very important in the context of how it's been perceived and received within the community. So this is from a blog post from the Mozilla. I'm sorry, this is the components of the definition itself. They focus on the data and the code and the weights. For the data, we recognize that there are some legitimate cases and reasons when you cannot share the data. There may be legal reasons why, there may be privacy reasons why. In the United States, we have a set of policies called HIPAA that basically govern how patient data is to be not shared in most cases, but under what conditions they may be, but that the software and the weights should be made freely available. And so that these are the core components of this definition. The definition is something that I believe OSI has played a very important role in raising the awareness around openness and open models, but we are not the only ones that are thinking about this. Most recently, there's this project that has been formed called the American Truly Open Models, or the ATOM project. You can see from here, this is the main webpage, and you can see that they are saying we need to move toward more fully open models for US research and industry. So again, this is not saying out of universities or because of public value or so on, but literally for US industry and US research. And this is affirmed by some of the people who signed this, this ATOM project call. If you can see at the top is the CEO of Hugging Face, but then there's people associated with NVIDIA. There's the former head of policy research at OpenAI. This is a group of people who are very well connected to the private sector, who are very well connected to the investment sector in the United States. They are calling for this kind of move towards openness when it comes to AI. And in particular, you can see on that webpage some of these charts that demonstrate why they are, in fact, calling upon this. And this data comes from Hugging Face, which, if you're not familiar, is basically like a GitHub or a repository or a platform where people can share their data and share their AI models. And then in most cases, if they're open, you can download them, you can use them, you can build on them, and so on. And what they've noticed is that very recently, there's been this so-called flip, that in terms of total downloads, the Chinese models are surpassing the ones from the US. I do visit Hugging Face on a regular basis, just out of curiosity, to be honest. And I've noticed that if you look at the filters of most liked, most downloaded, trending, they do tend to be DeepSeek or other kinds of Chinese models, or they tend to be open models from other places as well. So this is the trend that this ATOM project has seen. They have a series of other slides that demonstrate this as well, and you can look through these as easily as I can, but in essence, you can see that when Llama was first released from Meta, which, by the way, is an open weight model, they opened up the weights, but not the data or detailed information about the data, and not the code. But you can see that the red line is Qwen, the purple line on the left is Mistral, and the yellow line is DeepSeek. And you can see how all of those are rising. You can see model adoption by region. You can see a sort of significant increase in the models coming out of China. This is the community preference of the models on the left, the best open models over time in terms of performance. So this is a really important point, because early on, I think there was a lot of discussion that, yes, you can have an open model, but it can't perform as well as the proprietary models and the commercial models. And that is changing right before our eyes. And I think this week, or at the earliest last week, DeepSeek released another model called a sparse attention model, which, again, matches the performance of their other DeepSeek models, yet does so with much less energy use, much less compute, much less inferencing time, and so on, to the point where after they announced that model, I also announced they're cutting their prices by 50%. And they claim that it's very much tied to that. So it's not simply I want to use open models because I like them or I prefer them or it's some value kind of argument. They're actually performing extremely well as well. This is a slide that came from Jim Zemlin at the Linux Foundation at the last Open Source Europe Summit. I believe this was during his keynote talk. And you can see the arguments being made in terms of how openness can play an important part of sovereignty at the national level. In terms of, again, being able to make choices, being able to govern and to manage, maybe even control the trajectory of how AI gets developed, rather than simply saying, I'm going to consume this as a service and use whatever you give me. There are reasons around transparency and auditability. There's the questions around how data gets managed, national security, contributions to open source software. There's many, many reasons why, and you can see all of this laid out very well graphically in this slide from Jim Zemlin. Now let me come back to this idea of protocols. So earlier I talked about the importance of TCP/IP and HTTP. So when it came to AI as a form of infrastructure, there's a couple of really important differences. Number one, I don't know all the developers or builders of the internet and the web, but there's been much written about them. They did think about the infrastructure components early on. They recognized this could become a global substrate from which we can build all sorts of applications and tools and services and communities and so on. Therefore, the protocols were developed early in the process, and they were developed early in the process to be open, but to foster this kind of interoperability, that I should be able to use different tools across different contexts, different domains, geographies, and so on. That didn't happen with AI. And I think one thing that may have gotten forgotten in much of the conversations today about AI is the original ChatGPT was an experiment. If you go back to the release and you see the documentation and the announcement, they literally said, we are just looking for your feedback. We're putting this out there, we've tested this, but we're looking for your feedback. It went, quote, viral so quickly, and it's true, it reached this 100 million user threshold, which for some reason is the really important threshold, much quicker than any other kind of technology. And I'll be completely candid. If somebody came to me and said, if we give you $10 million, can you turn this into a business, a profitable business? It would be very hard for me to say, no, I don't want your $10 million. But it was an experiment. It was not released as a product, and there was not a product roadmap. But then suddenly there was huge investment in it as an experiment. And then now it feels like it is this part of infrastructure. So we're seeing the rise of protocols somewhat after the fact. From my own research perspective and my own practitioner viewpoint, we should have had the protocols first. We should have thought about how do you get data to move around in these AI models? How do you get the models to talk to each other? How do you, we weren't even thinking about agents when ChatGPT came out, but we didn't do that. So now what we're finding is that these protocols are starting to happen, quote, after the fact. And a few of the ones that I think are very promising that we're working with through the Open Forum for AI, and many other people are working in other contexts, are Open Mind, which is a nonprofit organization that was started by Andrew Trask, who used to be at Google for their DeepMind project. And it's in essence like a Dropbox for AI, if you want to think of it that way. It's kind of a way to abstract away the complexities of dealing with data when you're building an AI model. So it's very much about data interoperability without having to understand all the complexities of how a particular AI model may work. Anthropic has released something called the Model Content Protocol, or MCP. And this is very much about how applications have interoperability. So if I'm building applications as part of my AI system and I need to access different kinds of data and different kinds of applications and systems, and then even more recently, there's now conversations about interoperability of agents and agent to agent, or A2A, which I think originally came out of Google, is a way in which there seems to be now these conversations about how do we get agents to identify other agents, work with those agents, and then you can use MCP and SIFT to think about the applications and the data. And fundamentally, this is really about choice. That I don't simply use one AI model and try to make it do everything, is that I may need different models, I may need different prompts, I may need
Professor Sayeed, Professor Sayeed, the audio is, this is for you, Professor Sayeed, no audio. Professor Sayeed, we are not able to hear you. I'm just requesting everyone, just kindly bear with us. This is to request you, Professor Sayeed, we are not able to hear you.
Those particular models, or any particular
Yes.
model for that matter. So instead, what we do through our platform is we give people a lot more agency and a lot more transparency and the ability to mix and match. And then they can start to see, oh, look, when I did it this way, look at how many tokens it used, look at how much it cost, look at how much energy it required. Or I can use it and it's really good for this kind of class in philosophy, but it's really bad for this kind of research in chemistry. And that people will get a better sense of what combination of tools and protocols working together can meet different kinds of use cases. And then we can use that to influence how we develop AI over time. There's also a project at MIT called NANDA, the Network Agents in Decentralized Architecture, and this is from their website. And they think of themselves as this kind of adapter. So in essence, if you're using MCP or A2A, the ones I just described, or HTTPS from the web, or now web, which is about embedding natural language kind of queries into websites and so on, Nanda is the way that you can harmonize and bring all those things together. And they've produced this diagram that shows, use case of someone saying, can I have my usual order, and how you'd have to go through all these different kinds of interfaces and services to have that met. If I, and this is a simple case, but if I'm at home and I want to order some food, if I have to use one AI model to order it, another AI model to have it delivered, another AI model to manage my payment, you could make that work, but I don't think that is as desirable as I want to make the order and then it's done. And there are lots of implications about how your data is managed, how your data sovereignty is managed. There's lots of implications about making sure that people don't become passive. There's early evidence showing that if you just simply use AI and don't do it critically and do it in a thorough manner, that it may degrade your critical thinking and skills over time. So this is not to say that we should just run and do this without any kind of reflection, deliberation, and consideration, but that there are technical components coming together. Just like these early diagrams you saw, TCP/IP and HTTP, where we can get this kind of much more comprehensive and flexible framework around AI. So I will shift and start to transition to the end by focusing on people. When I talk about infrastructure, I mean both technology and people. Most infrastructure development is socio-technical in nature. The technology is important, but the social aspects are arguably more important. And this is a screenshot from an announcement at Carnegie Mellon about a grant that my colleague in the Heinz School of Information Systems and Public Policy, Christoph Kammermehl, has received. That's looking at the labor implications of AI. Now, I am not an expert in this area. I've taken some economics courses, but certainly not enough to claim that I understand this deeply. But I did hear Christoph give a presentation recently. So I'm basing it on that, but I would, if you have more questions or more interest about this, I would encourage you to look him up, look up this grant, look up his publications, because he's doing some very interesting and important work that I'll do my best to describe. So there's 2 slides from a recent talk that he gave that I've asked him if I can share, and he's happy to do so, and I'll try to walk through them. And on the right is really the heart of a lot of the research he's doing, is that he and his colleagues have, in essence, developed this model or graphical framework for where automation can occur, the so-called cone of automation. Whenever a new technology is deployed, there's a set of questions or considerations that have to be accounted for. One of them is, just because it's technically feasible doesn't actually mean that it has economic benefits. So this is a key question about, yes, we can perhaps do this with technology, but it's not necessarily going to make us more productive. And that adoption is very much focused on looking at the division of labor, so to speak, in terms of breaking complex tasks, long tasks into smaller steps that allow higher rates of work. But then if you think about machines, not just AI, but generally, they tend to be more sensitive to the complexity of tasks, but less sensitive to the rate of work. And in essence, what that means is if it's a repetitive task that you train a machine for, it does that generally speaking, much better, much more efficient than a person. But it's not easy to just turn that into something else. I recently saw a talk from a couple of senior faculty members about robotics, and they were pointing out that when you see these pictures of manufacturing facilities with lots of robots, that is all orchestrated. Even if it's a complex set of robots moving around, like a bunch of robots moving around on a floor, it is very much done with a map, it's done with pathways and so on. And that if you change that, you probably will end up with some kind of disaster. And that it's more costly to redeploy these kinds of technologies, than it might be for people. So in the context of AI, he shared this slide, which basically you can see, from a model perspective or a graphical perspective, he's asserting that that cone of automation can be expanded, by generative AI, and that there are more cases, more contexts, more scenarios where you can see AI having this kind of impact, because it is at least we think it's more flexible. It's not as expensive to deploy, particularly like hardware systems, robotics, and so on. But one point that I, made to him when he was saying that it also is prone to errors, there's, quite a bit of issues around tolerance around errors and so on, is that earlier point I made about, are you taking a system that is just given to you as a service that you use and you just consume, and you're constrained by whatever you're offered? Or what about the idea of more open approaches where you can customize, and you can pick and choose, and you have a wider range of how you can reconfigure and redeploy AI? And in essence, the hypothesis I put forward is, if you think about open source AI models or open models, does that, expansion of this cone even get greater? And he said he had not explicitly thought about that, and that he will think about that in the context of this work. So no conclusions at this point have been reached. But if we find that by working with more open types of models, it has more opportunities for workforce development, both in terms of the kinds of things people are able to do with AI, the ability to modify and customize the way in which people and AI work together, we may find that this cone is actually expanded more by using open approaches. So I think that would be a really, really important outcome. And the final point or message I'll leave you with is the way that we're thinking about this very much in the open forum for AI is moving away from this idea of human in the loop to AI in the loop. How can we make sure that people remain the primary actor in whatever task, whatever teaching, research, information discovery, you name it, that people are working with, and that AI becomes the supporting or secondary role, and that I can pick and choose what types of AI I use to make that happen. And that it's really important to keep that in mind, and that is fostered much more with these kinds of open approaches. And then I'll come back to that first point I made. We have choice. I do believe that these are early days, that we can influence how AI is developed, even at the national level, and that we're seeing, in my opinion, something we've seen with other technology developments, other infrastructure developments, is we start off with these very centralized approaches, sometimes open, sometimes closed, and then we find that, no, it's actually better to distribute this, it's actually better to think about cases on the edge, and that when you start having that more complex, decentralized approach, that openness will almost always certainly be a much more effective strategy for making that happen. And there are people actively talking about running AI on your cell phone, that you have the data on your cell phone, and that you can start imagining how networks of these things come together. And I know that the cell phone has been one of the most empowering technologies in the developing world. So I think about that as well. So I hope this has given you some sense of where we may be able to take AI, and then more importantly, how you can be involved in taking AI in those directions. So I'll end with this slide, which will have links to some of the resources I've talked about in this talk. And I hope that you found it interesting and useful, and that you have questions and we can have some discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Professor Sayeed, for delivering the 27th DELNET annual lecture in such a truly empowering in an enlightening manner. Each one of us have felt truly inspired, by the vision that you have shared today. The many of the unanswered questions, have been answered through this brief presentation of yours, which was highly, highly enlightening, quite visionary, and giving us, the insights at what is exactly happening, and a very strong message that you have conveyed, which each one of us, those, especially in the fields of libraries, and for that matter, in any of the disciplines, wherein we are really pondering about that whether AI is going to replace the humans, but your message loud and clear that yes, we, the human beings, have to tame this technology. They should always be, as an assistive technology to us, rather than the human beings should always be at the driving seat, and we should be utilizing it as a supplemental technology. Thank you so very much for such a wonderful presentation of yours, which has truly highlighted, and also the latest developments which are happening, the way the world is now moving. And when we are looking at it, that yes, it is the early days of the technology, we should not really think about that this is a well-established, still not much research is going in, and as you have highlighted, that whatsoever has been happening, it's more like they're trying to explore it further, not as a very standard kind of a well-established product. And whatever the outcomes are coming in, it does fascinate, humanity. It does fascinate the, the human minds that, oh yes, this is something which can be done through the technology. But we should always remember that we should always be the one, who should drive the technology the way that we wanted, rather than being driven away by the technology. So thank you so very much, Professor. We have felt truly honored with your such a wonderful, presentation of yours, and also clearing the air, because there have been, and something coming from you, clearly indicating that the professions are going to survive, the human beings are going to survive, and they will wait through, this very overwhelming technology which is being there. And we should not really feel scared of the technology, and it's more to really customize it, to see to it that we use the best part of it, to make the systems more, more effective. And this, the constant debate, even which is happening about the ethics, the responsible AI, that you are being at the helm of affairs for that. I think we need to also spread more awareness about it, educating even the users about it, whether in academia and industries. And your presentation has just made it possible for us also to know, worldwide at a global level, the efforts which are being made. And everyone, I think everyone has to be responsible enough to spread that, to sensitize and enlighten, everyone around. Thank you so very much, Professor. We can't really thank you enough for your time and efforts in being there with us. And we really look forward to having you here in India at Delhi, and we would love to host you and have you in person to have a program over here, and to really get further benefited with your vast expertise. But you have truly enlightened, illuminated, and have cleared many of these doubts which have been lingering around, and people having that notion that is it something which has been threatening their own profession, happening across the domains, but this word coming from you, it's in that makes things so very convincing that we are onto the right path, and we would be able to really move ahead with this technology, taking the technology along with us. Thank you so very much, Professor. With your permission, quickly would like to make the floor open for questions. And this is to request our colleagues who are being there from across the continents. We are making the floor open for questions, requesting you, if you have any questions, you would be having, though the questions have been really answered in such a very lucid manner by our distinguished speaker. So requesting you all, I'm just lowering firstly, and requesting everyone to be very, very precise in their questions. So now I'm making the floor open for questions. Please raise your digital hand if you may like us to get you connected to our esteemed distinguished speaker, and we will really be happy to connect you. Please kindly raise your digital hand, and we will be very, very happy to get you connected. I'm just quickly moving across our attendees to see the questions that they may like to ask. We have Mr. M. Mukesh Kumar. Mr. M. Mukesh Kumar, you have raised your digital hand. Could you please unmute yourself? This is for you, Mr. M. Mukesh Kumar. Could you please unmute yourself? This is Mr. M. Mukesh Kumar. This is yet another challenge which happens in the online. Someone raised a digital hand in a classroom. To say you would agree with this fact, because in a classroom you can make out, whether they're genuinely wanting to ask. I believe AI has to do something for this. Nishant Trivedi, Nishant, could you please unmute yourself? Mr. Nishant Trivedi, request to each one of you, our attendees, if you genuinely want to ask a question, then only please raise your hand. This is for you, Nishant Trivedi. I have unmuted you. Please unmute yourself. Let's try to make a best use of the time and not really spend the time in unmuting, and let me just quickly move and to see. Otherwise, I'm going to request, I could see that, and we will just quickly see if we have any questions being placed in the chat. No, not really in that. Yes. This is a question, one of the questions coming in, and that is, can we compare? This question is from Dr. Gopakumar MN, and the question is, can we compare network agents with the centralized architecture? Can we compare network agents with the centralized architecture?
So I'm not sure if the compare is the main point of connection there. Certainly, agentic AI is not inconsistent with the centralized architecture. It's possible to have agents working with some type of centralized architecture. I would submit that it would be limiting, though. I think the more that we have a decentralized architecture that fosters multiple different kinds of approaches that agents can then take advantage of, that would lead to more useful outcomes, a wider variety of outcomes, a wider variety of applications, and so on. I mean, the agent-to-agent protocol I mentioned came out of Google. At least I believe it did. So I think Google is hoping that Gemini will be the platform that people use to implement A2A. But I do also think earnestly both Anthropic and Google are looking to make these open protocols. At least that's my current impression. And if that's the case, then it can be used with any of the models. So you can say that I'm going to do this using Gemini, or you can say that I'm going to do this using multiple AI systems underneath as well. So my sense is that a decentralized approach would give you more options and choices.
That's great. Professor Sayeed, one question for you. Since you have got the best of the blending, the academia, and then you are also being now the Home of Affairs for AI. So in the US, when we think about when we really see the scenario in higher education institutions in US, what is the, the kind of the stand that the academic world is taking, for AI to confront, at the same time, how do they safeguard the level of the quality of education, and especially for these youngsters that we have in our colleges, how this is being tackled? Because this is a major concern coming in across any country that we think about, but what are the kinds of, how is the academic world and the administrators are handling the situation?
Yeah, it's a really important point. I think that I'm at Carnegie Mellon, where I have access to some of the world's greatest AI researchers. But even at my institution, we have enterprise or university-wide licenses for Gemini and Copilot, and we're starting to roll out ChatGPT. Most of them are coming from our so-called central computing services group. And I think that's important. I think that's worthwhile. I think everyone who has an opportunity, particularly through their university, to experiment with those platforms should do so. I think that's a healthy and useful thing to do. But what I will also say is that there is, I don't think there's been a major substantive study on this, though if there has, if somebody knows it, I'd certainly like to hear about it. But there's growing anecdotal evidence right now that individuals are finding those somewhat underwhelming, to be honest, right? There's this report that the group that runs the NANDA project at MIT just recently released a report, and there are people who've criticized the reports. I'm not, again, in any way implying it's academically rigorous, but it is basically saying that vast majority of organizations, something on the order of 95%, I think, are not seeing productivity gains by using these sort of out-of-the-box systems. And there's a couple of points I'll raise in that regard. One is that the governor of Pennsylvania, where Carnegie Mellon is in the state of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, had a pilot program with ChatGPT, and he reported on that. He came to Carnegie Mellon to give a briefing on the outcomes. And even in that pilot context, he said a large percentage of people simply use it and just say, okay, great, sure, I can go answer some questions. Some of them take existing workflows and make them better. Some of them take existing documentation and make them more efficient. And he talked about, I don't remember the exact numbers, but he took the number of IT policies in Pennsylvania and reduced them greatly. And you know, as an IT professional, I appreciate that. If the state of Pennsylvania has less IT documents for me to go through, that's helpful. But only a very few people were basically able to go in and say, I'm going to redo this. I'm going to re-engineer how I do my work. And I juxtapose that with this DARE platform that I'm talking about we're developing at Carnegie Mellon, where I'll give you one story. Is a writing professor basically said at the end of a semester, you know, a large percentage of students just generated the same kind of paper, probably using ChatGPT. And I don't think that's uncommon. You know, I probably should have asked permission if he was okay with me saying this, but I don't think that's unusual. I think if you go to any university, you'll probably hear this story, right? That particularly in a writing class, students are just throwing something in ChatGPT and handing it in. And of course, he was very frustrated by this, but he worked with my colleague who's leading the development of DARE, and they've turned that around in the sense that basically what he'll do, apparently what they'll do next semester is he will start with that paper. He will tell the students, look, this is what your peers did last semester, okay? Don't do this, please. Let's start with this paper and use this platform that allows you to use those different models, allows you to use different prompts, change the settings, those kind of things. And then customize this paper based on your individual contributions, right? Understand that you have autonomy and flexibility, and to use an engineering term, you have degrees of freedom, right? I think the thing with these commercial models is they don't have any degrees of freedom. You're given something and you have to work with it. But the more we can, in essence, say, use those models, learn about them, but don't stop the process there, right? Exactly. Particularly in the university setting, don't stop the process there. Take that as a starting point for an exploration. That I think will be a really important role for universities. There are universities, researchers who are calling on administrators, university administrators, to embrace this, right? And to not say, let's not just assume the default should be an enterprise license for one of these companies, but that is part of a bigger set of strategies and options.
Thank you very much, Professor Sayeed. This is yet another point that you have highlighted, that this should be considered as a starting point for exploration, not the ending note. Like, you know, it should inspire the, you know, these AI tools. You know, it's like having an advisor with you. You know, you want to have interaction done with someone, and rather than just taking it as that version as the final version. This is yet another, this is a very strong message, I believe, you know, those of us who are being connected, because this should be, it's like, you know, it should really inspire you, ignite, you know, your imagination to really start thinking, you know, on those terms, and not take that version as the major version. Because yet another part of it, if we see, our youngsters, if you think about, and for that age group, because the power to think, you know, the shallow thinking which is now coming in, the cognitive decline. I believe some of the psychologists, you know, and others, you know, the intellectual world may really like to conduct some studies to interlink these two facets. Are we not really making our society, you know, the people with the less intellectual quotient now with them? Because the power to think, the cognitive decline is definitely, because the very essence of the human mind, you know, the human brain, for the decision making, the power to think about it and to assess the situation and to do. Are we not really getting, being, I won't say the sideline, but are we not, parting away with that very strong inherent, capability of the human beings? So
right.
I don't know whether any studies have been carried out, to connect the two and to see that is there something happening in that particular domain. One of the things, Professor Sayeed, just quickly, I know that we're just about to, I know that you must be having an assignment also today. Just wanting to ask, how expensive is the AI technology development? We're talking in terms of the expenditure, which is being incurred. You have, so elaboratively discussed about the infrastructures, which are being AI as an infrastructure, and openness, right. Yes, making something which is more, more visible and more, can be adopted by the people across. But how affordable is this technology? And this, when we talk about this AI as an infrastructure, so is it again going to be a digital have-nots, what the world has seen? How do you really see, when we think about, will everyone be able to develop those infrastructures? In a country like India, we are now, as we are all aware, a huge, large amount of money has now been put into to create AI as an infrastructure. But is it something which will be affordable across? Are we able to create again a society, who can do? What is your take on this?
Yeah, so I put a couple of links into the chat. I think it may be only going to the organizers. So if you could share that with everybody, I would appreciate it. They're both relevant to your question. So there is clearly an enormous amount of money being poured into AI, particularly in the United States, both from the perspective of just building the models, but also the infrastructure required to train and fine tune the models, and even broader infrastructure as well. I think it is really important to compare and contrast that with these other approaches that I've described, which are significantly cheaper. And one of the things that I hear a lot is, well, how do we know that? How do we know it's that cheap, that much cheaper? So there's the alternate question is, how do we know it's really that expensive to build the commercial models, right? Are we going through and auditing those companies and asking them how they're spending their money? I don't think so. So when DeepSeek first came out, I think it was Hugging Face that in fact that came up with OpenSeek, right? They basically re-engineered it and came up with a fully open version. And I think the subsequent versions of DeepSeek have been open to begin with. So there are lots of questions to ask of these open models, and I think we should do that. But I would say you need to ask the same questions of the closed models. And there is clearly a difference between the amount of funding that's being poured into the commercial proprietary models and the amount of money that's being reported by these open models. And I'm not here to say one is right, one is wrong, but those questions do need to be asked. And the DARE platform that I shared is Carnegie Mellon's answer in some sense to how can we have this conversation about the role of each of these different kinds of approaches. And then the Omni project, which I also put forward, is something that's coming out of the global south or the global majority. And I heard the director of that project speak at that AI for Good Summit. And she made exactly this point. Countries don't need to spend hundreds of billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars, however many. There are smaller models, there are smaller foundational models even, and so on, and that we need to think about all these different kinds of approaches. So I think that there's different narratives, different stories being told right now, and I think it's important to think about, rigorously think about both of them. And one final point I make is that the DeepSeek in the US models is cast in this geopolitical light, US versus China, right? I mean, that's just an obvious thing. I think it's much more important to think of it as a closed versus open. And I think the Atom project is an explicit recognition that forget the geopolitics. Open models are really important regardless of the geopolitics.
Thank you very much, Professor. This resonates very strongly even for an organization like DELNET, having this vast network of libraries, open mantra, open collaborations, and it's a shared vision. So, the shared vision for AI across the globe, and then there is a need for, as you have, also demonstrated very clearly in your presentation. So this openness, as a design model. So openness ensures that everyone is being an integral part of that. They're very participative in it, and then creating those shared platforms. It's not that everyone has to invest in that, and then a need for. So sharing is caring, the message being loud and clear yet again through this. Open collaborations, open platforms. Let everyone be a part of the change. Let everyone participate in that. Such a wonderful, wonderful, 27th annual lecture. We could have never thought of, doing this, without you being there. We truly have greatly admired Professor Sayeed. This last 1 year, we have been interacting, and we greatly have admired, take my words that we have felt so much honored, to have you with us on this platform. And
thank you.
This 27th DELNET annual lecture forever, it's being etched in, we will cherish it forever. And also the message that you have conveyed through this. You are the one, you are a global expert on this, and hearing this, it's so reassuring, for each one of us that yes, we have to, use this technology as an assistive technology, as a supplemental technology, and should not just get overwhelmed and swept away and thinking that this is just going to take over, the entire humanity now. Thank you so very much, Professor Sayeed. May I have a pleasure and honor of presenting a memento as a token of our very warm.
Thank you so much.
It is not an AI enabled, it is entirely, yes. This is something that with great sense of gratitude, with a great sense of admiration and respect for you, we request you to accept this. Along with this, we will also be presenting and sending it to you a plaque of honor from DELNET for your remarkable contributions, to the profession, and also for delivering the 27th DELNET annual lecture in such a, magnificent, extraordinary, simply exceptional and extraordinary way. We remain ever indebted to you. I'll ensure that this remains as intact. And the next time when we interact, we will be really honored to have you. This,
I will.
Just
I look forward to it.
Be there, yeah?
Yes, it's been a while since I've seen a hockey, so thank you.
And when you are coming to India next year, please kindly.
I hope so.
It will,
I hope so. For the
most humble request. We are in Delhi. It will be a pleasure in your itinerary. Do keep a slot for us. We will truly feel honored, and we would also ensure that we have a professional colleagues who will get a chance, to meet you in person. It has been a great honor and pleasure, Professor. Remain truly grateful to you and truly admire the great work that you are being engaged with. You are a light. You are a beacon of hope. I must say that because your words today have really been quite comforting, in fact, for everyone that we are there to survive, and we have a role to play around in this world, and we should not just think that that we are going to be completely taken over by the technology, by AI. So it will remain as an artificial only, and it can never compete with the real intelligence. And so we need to really harvest and cultivate our own selves. Anything as a parting words that you may like to say to our colleagues who are being there across the globe?
Really, just to thank you again, thank everyone who attended. Very much appreciate your attention, and I hope this is the beginning of a set of conversations and not the end.
Yeah, thank you so very much. And with your permission, would like to seek your permission to place this entire video recording of the session on the DELNET YouTube channel.
Yes, absolutely. It'd be my pleasure.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so very much, Professor. It has been a great honor and pleasure. Thank you so much. Can't really thank you enough. It has truly been an incredible experience, to have you on our platform today. Looking forward, this is just a beginning we have made today, and we really look forward, to a very meaningful and purposeful conversations in the days to come. Thank you so very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you very much on behalf of DELNET and on behalf of each one of us. And we would also like to thank all our colleagues who have been able to join us from all different nooks and parts of the world to be there with us at the 27th DELNET annual lecture. And as we said, we are just going to have more conversations with a very esteemed, distinguished expert, Professor Sayeed. And we really look forward to host him, to welcome him in person when he visits India, most likely next year. We look forward, eagerly, to that occasion to celebrate once again, your being, with us today. Thank you so very much, Professor Sayeed. Thank you so very much, each one of you. God bless you all and have the most blessed times ahead. Thank you very much. Has been a great honor and pleasure for DELNET to have each one of you with us. And we really look forward to our continued professional interactions. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor. Once again, Sayeed. Thank you. Truly have felt so very delighted and can't thank you enough for this. God bless. God bless you. God bless you. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you one and all once again.